I was in 6th grade when this happened. It all began the week of Halloween, when I would stay after school to help decorate a haunted house for my school's Halloween carnival. I often got to stay and hang out with some of my friends, while being rewarded with pizza for helping decorate. Along with my friends, there was also another boy who would stay late. I'll call him Aiden. We had gotten along for the entire time we stayed after school, and he never once gave me any reason to feel uneasy around him. He was genuinely a funny and cool kid. But anyway, fast forward 2 weeks, I was suddenly approached by a group of girls in my grade who were all excited with wide grins on their faces. I asked them what was going on, only for them to tell me that I had a secret admirer who would be texting me that night. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't excited, or at the very least curious. I wanted to know who it was. Later that night, as I was about to go to sleep, I received a notification from Messenger, the only app I had at the time that I used to communicate with my parents when I was home alone. The message was from Aiden. I had completely forgotten that I added him on Facebook on Halloween. I opened the message and it read, "Olivia, I need to talk to you." I was concerned and quickly replied, "Yeah, what's going on? Everything okay?" To this day, I wish I hadn't replied. The typing bubbles appeared and stayed there for a good 2 minutes, which meant he was still typing. It felt like forever until his message finally came through. I didn't expect what came next. In a long paragraph, he confessed his love for me and how I'd been driving him crazy since Halloween. He also explained how he tried to impress me during recess with his soccer skills, but I never seemed to notice him. He said he was growing tired of being ignored, and it ended with, "I want you to notice me. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, will you be my girlfriend?" I cringed at every word. I stared at the message for a long time. What the hell? I barely even knew this kid, and we had drifted apart a long time ago. I tried to come up with a way to let him down gently, as I didn't want to hurt his feelings. I told him I didn't like him that way, and that I wanted to just be friends. I could tell right away that he didn't like this answer. He kept asking me why, and I had to come up with a reason each time until he eventually stopped responding. The next morning was a nightmare for me. Some of his friends kept approaching me, telling me that Aiden wanted to kiss me, which he had told the entire grade he wanted to do, and that he would do it, even if it meant cornering me. Taking this as a threat, I decided to tell my teacher. She instructed me to stay inside during recess and lunch, and to run right back to the classroom if he ever got close to me. This wasn't enough for me. I reported him to the principal, who assured me he would address the situation immediately, which gave me some relief. I should mention that I lived right across the street from my school, and everyone knew this, including Aiden, which leads me to what happened next. Later that week, I was walking home from school. I hadn't even been inside my house for more than 2 minutes before I heard someone knocking on my front door. I peeked out the window just in time to see someone ducking behind a parked car across the street. It had to be Aiden. He must have been following me. My mum opened the door to find a piece of paper on the floor, and unsurprisingly, it was addressed to me. I read the note aloud, and it said there was a surprise waiting for me under the Cadillac in my driveway, which at the time belonged to my brother. My mom went to check and found nothing, but after that day, my brother's Cadillac stopped working. I still have no idea what Aiden did to the car, but my brother was forced to sell it. Unfortunately, my nightmare didn't end there. I was constantly harassed by Aiden's friends, telling me to give him a chance and that he would treat me right. There was even a moment when I caught Aiden taking a picture of me walking home. The only reason I noticed was because I barely heard the sound of an iPhone camera behind me. Who knows how many photos of me he had on his phone. Every morning, I woke up to a message from him with something along the lines of, "I can't wait to see you at school," or "I bet you'll look beautiful today." The harassment and stalking were only getting worse, making me fear for my safety, especially now that he knew where I lived. Finally, I was called into the counselor's office, and I felt relieved, expecting her to tell me that Aiden would face consequences or that the authorities would get involved, anything. Instead, what I heard was worse. The counselor proceeded to tell me that boys will be boys, that they do crazy things when they're in love, and that I shouldn't be upset about this. She told me I should feel flattered, as this kind of thing was bound to happen, and that the only thing I could do was accept it and learn from it. At the time, I didn't see the problem with her words. I genuinely believed her. But looking back now, this was an insane and disturbing thing to say to a sixth grader who was being sexually harassed and who feared for her safety almost every day. That afternoon, I came home from school and told my mom everything the counselor had said, and she was rightfully furious. I was called to the principal's office again that same week, this time with my mom present. I remember very clearly my mom telling the counselor and principal, "What are you waiting for? For something bad to happen to her before you do something?" She continued to ask why it was taking so long for action to be taken. They both remained silent. My mom ended the meeting by threatening the counselor and telling her never to speak to me again, unless she was present. But unfortunately, I don't think the school ever disciplined Aiden, which enrages me to this day. He essentially got away with everything. It doesn't even end there. One night during the weekend, when my parents had gone shopping, I was about to go to bed after watching a YouTube video on my iPad when I heard something at my window. I was on the second floor, so this was especially strange. The only things that normally hit my window are birds accidentally flying into it. I sat up, listening. Then it happened again. It sounded like someone had thrown something at the glass. Then it happened again and again. Consistent thuds that started to frighten me. I finally gathered the courage to get up from my bed and see what it was. My heart dropped into my stomach when I opened the curtain and looked down to see Aiden holding a handful of rocks, looking up at my window. He had somehow managed to figure out which window was mine. He was about to throw another when he noticed me. I could vaguely see that he was saying something, but I didn't stop to find out what. I remember checking if every window and door was locked, and thankfully, everything was secure. When I returned to my room, I had received 4 messages from Aiden. "Why did you leave? I just want to talk. I'm sorry. All I wanted was a kiss. Please forgive me. You are not who I thought you were. Bye." I blocked him after that. Thankfully, I never had another incident, even though I had to see him throughout my entire school career, from 6th grade to senior year. The last thing I heard about him was that he was arrested. God only knows for what. The saddest and scariest part of my story, though, is that a counselor was comfortable telling me that this kind of behavior was a compliment and a learning experience for me as a girl. I just hope that woman no longer works with children and that I never have to see Aiden again. I was 22 when I started seeing a guy named Blake that I met on a dating app. We went on 4 dates over the course of about 5 weeks. Initially, everything seemed normal. Our first date was a quick coffee meetup, less than an hour, more of a screening to make sure he seemed like a decent person. The second date was at a local pub for drinks. We both got pleasantly buzzed and had a nice time. Our third date was dinner, which was when I started to question things. I wasn't sure if I truly connected with his personality, and I felt like something was slightly off about him. The date ended with a kiss, our first and only, which led me to convince myself that things were okay since I had allowed the kiss to happen. About 2 weeks later, we went on our 4th and final date. We went for drinks again, but this time I approached it with less enthusiasm, paying closer attention to the little quirks in his behavior that struck me as unusual. It's difficult to articulate exactly what I mean, but some of his mannerisms gave off unsettling and borderline disturbing vibes. He began drinking excessively during this date and became overly touchy, attempting to kiss me multiple times. I'm not comfortable with public displays of affection, especially while sitting at a bar with people nearby. I politely declined his advances, and shortly after, mentioned that I was tired, strongly implying we should leave. He asked for the check, paid it, and we collected our coats and left. As we walked toward our cars, he stopped me and bluntly asked if we could go home together. I replied, "Not tonight. I'm tired and have work tomorrow," which was a lie. Surprisingly, he persisted, saying he would drive me to work and other such nonsense. I found his persistence absurd, whether he was intoxicated or not. I was also concerned about him driving home drunk. At that point, I decided I wouldn't see him again. I went to my car in the parking lot across the street and began driving home slowly, being cautious since I had consumed a few drinks. I wasn't drunk, but I was still very careful. I was also hyper-aware of my surroundings, scanning for police, which might be why I noticed that the same car remained behind me even after I made at least 3 turns. At a certain stoplight, I realized it looked like Blake's car. I texted him, "Are you following me?" He responded quickly, "Yes, I just want to make sure you get home okay." I called him, but he wouldn't answer. This was incredibly strange and frankly terrifying. I pulled over and texted him to stop following me, that I was fine. He stopped in the middle of the street for a moment, presumably to read my text, and then drove away. He didn't text back until I was home and in bed. His message read, "I hope I didn't weird you out tonight. Sorry I got so drunk. Next time we should do something more low-key, like dinner at my place or something." I didn't respond. The next morning, he followed up with, "Oh no, is the vibe dead?" I decided to wait a bit before responding. Not even 2 hours later, he sent a question mark, so I decided to reply before things escalated further. I wrote, "Hey, I had a great time getting to know you, but I just think our personalities don't click that much. I also really just want to focus on myself right now. I hope you understand." That's when the angry texts started coming in. The worst one read, "No, I don't understand. You strung me along for 4 dates to tell me that. How about you pay me back half of everything I bought for you?" There were several other angry texts containing personal information that I won't share, but they were alarming enough to prompt me to block him. I thought that would be the end of it, but then I started receiving non-stop calls from blocked numbers. I ignored all of them until he finally seemed to get the message and stopped. The next day, when my parents weren't home, I returned from work to find a bouquet of flowers on the front step with a card. The card contained an apology from Blake, asking for a second chance. He somehow knew where I lived. In his mind, he must have thought this would come across as charming or sweet, when in reality it was extremely alarming. I sent him a long final text telling him not to contact me anymore and never to come to my house again, or I would file for a restraining order. I kept his number blocked so I wouldn't see his response. I thought things would be over now, but I couldn't have been more wrong. Not long after this, I was home alone for the night. My parents' house is large, and I had a loft bedroom, which meant my bedroom was at the highest point in the house. I awoke in the middle of the night to something. I wasn't sure what it was at first, but I felt as though I was hearing noises from downstairs. I tried my best to listen closely, and then I heard what was unmistakably a door opening from somewhere outside my bedroom. No one was supposed to be home that night. Even in my haze from freshly waking up, I immediately thought, intruder. I crawled out of my bed onto the floor and shimmied under the bed before calling 911. I texted everyone in my family asking who was home. I heard some distant noises from somewhere in the house, one of the other bedrooms, and then my bedroom door opened and footsteps came up the carpeted stairs. After they reached the top step, there was silence. The whole room was carpeted so I couldn't hear potential footsteps, and then I heard the drawers next to my bed begin to open. I covered my mouth with my hands to mask my breathing. I could feel my heart racing. I heard a man's voice say, "God damn it," under his breath. In that moment I thought, wait, that might have sounded like Blake's voice. I still didn't move, and I prayed my phone wouldn't receive any notifications. I heard more rummaging sounds. He was going through my entire dresser. Then I heard and felt the bed move as he sat down. I was staring at the outline of 2 shoes through the bed skirt. Even in the dark, they were visible. I don't know what he was doing on the bed, but he sat there for over 2 or 3 minutes before getting up. I heard all the drawers close, then footsteps walking back down the stairs, the door shutting, and sounds of footsteps walking down the stairs to the living room. I called 911 again, still whispering into the phone just to be safe. I stayed on the line and remained under the bed for 10 to 15 minutes until one of the police officers arrived, and I went down to meet them at the front door. Even that was tense. After letting the officer in, I told him everything he didn't already know from the phone call. He responded by conducting a sweep of the house, and during that, another officer, a female, arrived to assist in the search. It turned out every window was unlocked, and one of them, the dining room window, was large enough for someone to crawl through, though no one had ever imagined someone squeezing through the bush in front of the window and then crawling through it. I gave a verbal statement of everything that happened. I was given a report number, and they left. When my parents returned home the next day, they already knew everything from my text and phone call with them. We went to the police station with my report number and provided as much information as possible, including text screenshots and his admission of following me home. They said they would investigate, though without solid proof it was him inside the house, it would be difficult. I think the case lost momentum when I couldn't provide definitive proof. However, I successfully obtained a restraining order against him and was advised never to accuse him of breaking in or to contact him again. Thankfully, he didn't contact me again. But from that point, until the moment I moved out of my parents' house, I was always uncomfortable, fearing he might be lurking outside. Even today, I sometimes worry he might discover where I currently live. I want to remain as anonymous as possible with this story. This was a very serious occurrence that gave me PTSD and unfortunately scarred me. I'm changing all towns and names so there's no way it can be traced back to me. I've been a very reclusive person for most of my life. It started at a young age. Even in my early school years, my teachers would tell my parents I had antisocial behavioral problems. I would even be included in what I guess you'd call special 20-minute classes for speech and behavior in elementary school. At the time, I didn't understand why I was being brought there while the rest of my class wasn't. Middle school was when the pressures of the social hell that school is really started to set in. Kids began forming their friend groups, and that only intensified in high school. I never had learning disabilities or anything. I just had social issues, which have improved as I've grown older, but I would still consider myself an awkward, introverted person. Nonetheless, I've made close friends, and I'm grateful for that. Now let's talk about romantic relationships. Of course, being socially withdrawn comes with difficulties in dating. To be honest, and this is relevant to my story, I lost my virginity at 21, which I'd say is somewhat late. At 23, I had already moved out of my parents' place. I had been working a high-paying job in my field for a couple of years and bought a townhouse in my hometown. It was reasonably priced but spacious, a 2-story place that would impress women if you owned it at 23. One day, while swiping on Tinder, I matched with an attractive woman I'll call Vanessa. We went on a date at a nearby restaurant for dinner. I was somewhat self-conscious, thinking she was judging me or that I was acting awkward. By the end of it, I felt she'd never want to see me again. But when I was in bed after getting home, she messaged me saying she really liked me and had fun. I was ecstatic. We went on a 2nd, 3rd, and 4th date, and honestly, things felt great once I got out of my head. We became an official couple fairly quickly, but the honeymoon phase didn't last forever. When you first start seeing someone, you get excited anytime they text or call. You crave the attention because ideally, it's reciprocal. Slowly, though, I began feeling that she was texting me perhaps too frequently, at all hours of the day. She'd ask where I was if I was doing something or took my time responding. She'd call me or send question marks to follow up. One day, while we were on the couch, she demanded we share our locations with each other. I wasn't thrilled about this. Even though I had nothing to hide, I agreed anyway. A couple of months into the relationship, with our locations shared, things took a serious downturn. She started questioning why I was at my friend Ryan's house and not answering her texts. It got so bad that one night when I was with Ryan and my friend Ethan in Ryan's basement on a Friday night, she actually showed up at his house. Ryan's mum walked Vanessa downstairs. She didn't even try to hide her anger and immediately spoke in a loud voice, almost yelling, reprimanding me for spending time at Ryan's instead of answering her texts about going to a winery the next day. I asked if we could discuss this later, but she insisted I leave with her. I apologized to my friends and went outside with her. We argued in the street. She wanted to come home with me, but I refused. We had driven separately, so I drove home and told her not to follow me. When I got home, I sent her a long text explaining that we needed a break and that I needed space. Should I have done this in person? Probably. Text breakups aren't usually fair, but honestly, I was afraid of her reaction in person. Of course, she started calling repeatedly and flooding my phone with texts. When I eventually stopped answering, I heard aggressive pounding on my front door and constant doorbell ringing. It got so bad that my neighbor came out and asked what she was doing. I heard Vanessa screaming at him that I was a terrible person and other insults. My neighbor calmly told her to go home. I listened to everything with my ear practically against the door. She did leave, and I was genuinely disturbed. I'm not saying the signs weren't there from the beginning. There were definitely warning signs, but I was blind to some of them because of the honeymoon effect and my focus on the positive aspects early on. The next day, I remembered to stop sharing my location with her. Immediately, as if she were obsessively checking, she angrily bombarded me with messages for doing that. With each text she sent, I became more certain of my decision to end things. My final message to her was, "I'm sorry, Vanessa. I have to block you for a while. You're scaring me." Surprisingly, she didn't come knocking again. However, I noticed she instantly stopped sharing her location as well. Exactly 1 week later, I went to Ryan's house again and hung out with the guys. I left around 11 p.m. and got home shortly after. I wasn't tired and was hungry, so I put some food in the microwave and sat on the couch to watch a movie. I was browsing streaming apps for something good. I wanted a scary movie. When the microwave beeped and the kitchen went silent, I suddenly heard a click or thud from the dining room. The layout of the downstairs of my townhouse formed a loop. Kitchen to dining room to living room to den, all separated by a wall in the middle. However, the den and dining room were connected by a door, not an open archway. For complete silence, I grabbed the TV remote and muted the TV. That's when I clearly heard the door between the den and dining room clicking open. I looked into the dining room and called out, "Who's in here?" There was no response. I entered the dining room, my blood running cold as I saw that the door was open. I have a habit of keeping doors in my home closed, and that door was no exception. I went to the kitchen and grabbed the largest knife from the knife block, then called 911 immediately. I had never called 911 once in my life until then. On the phone, I spoke loudly so whoever was in the house would hear that I was talking to the police. Whether this was a good idea is debatable. I said, "I think my crazy ex-girlfriend has broken into my house. Please send someone." The rest of the call involved explaining the situation, why I thought it was my ex, and the dispatcher instructing me to wait outside if possible. I went outside and waited near the front door. Surprisingly quickly, a police car arrived. I briefly explained what I thought was happening and led the officer into my home. Together, we conducted a thorough search of the place, and I'm telling you, no one was there. We checked the small crawl space hidden in the closet, every closet, under the beds, under the couches, even the small attic. When we confirmed the house was clear, the officer told me to call again if I heard anything, which suggested to me that he believed me and knew I wasn't making it up or hallucinating. My evening was obviously disrupted after that. There was no way I could relax in the living room and watch a movie now. I ate my food, which had been sitting in the microwave, went up to my room and locked the door. I texted my friends and family about how spooked I was, but given that no one was found in the house, I had to dismiss it as just one of those creepy moments when something in the house moves by itself. I almost texted Vanessa but refrained. I took a melatonin and from what I remember, quickly fell asleep. However, I'm a light sleeper and something woke me up. I didn't know what it was, but something in the room felt off. I checked my phone and saw a bunch of texts from an unknown number. That must have been what woke me. I quickly realized it was Vanessa. Without detailing the entire message, she was apologizing and begging to talk, asking to see me the next day in person. The rest of the text repeated, "Are you awake?" and "Wake up," over and over. She wrote, "Wake up" 8 times. Surprisingly, she hadn't tried calling. I responded, "Why are you awake right now? This is crazy that you're messaging me at this hour. Honestly, if I wasn't sure before, these past few days alone have confirmed that I don't want anything to do with you anymore. Please just leave me alone." Seconds after I hit send, I heard a scream from inside the closet next to my bed. It was Vanessa's voice yelling, "No." Then the closet door burst open. I didn't have time to think of anything besides jumping out of bed and rushing to the bedroom door. I noticed it wasn't locked anymore. Once outside the room, I pushed the door shut and held it closed as she tried to open it. She didn't just try to open it though. She began stabbing the door, and I saw the knife she was wielding piercing through from her side. In that moment, I decided to yell, "Baby, I love you, stop." Instead of something like, "You're sick and need help." When I said I loved her, she calmed down. I took this opportunity to silently call 911 again, while still holding the door shut. We spoke through the door as I had 911 on the line, and I improvised, telling her I was going through a difficult time, but still loved her and was planning to get back together with her. She responded in a frantic voice, "That's all I wanted to hear. Why couldn't you just be honest with me?" She asked me to open the door. I needed to stall, so I told her I was scared and wanted her to drop the knife. Eventually, she agreed, and I asked her to throw it across the room so I could hear it land. She did so. I heard the clang of the knife hitting the wall and falling to the floor. What I did next was yank the door open and tackle Vanessa to the ground. She screamed, fought, and became hysterical, but I didn't care. I held her down as I shouted my address and other details into the phone, which was still connected to 911. I restrained her until the police arrived. To my surprise, the police literally kicked down the front door. The sound was so loud it could be heard over Vanessa's struggles all the way upstairs. Officers quickly entered the room, and there were more of them than I expected. Vanessa was immediately handcuffed, hysterically crying the entire time. I think the only reason I wasn't crying was because I was in such shock. This was the worst, most traumatic night of my life. The nightmare didn't end there though. A long and serious legal process followed to get Vanessa convicted. I never wanted my name or any information to appear online or end up on crime YouTube channels, so I've been careful about sharing details that could be traced back to me. Vanessa is now imprisoned on very serious charges. No part of that makes me happy. This was someone I spent a significant portion of my life with, someone I thought I loved, someone who tried to kill me. She was mentally unwell, and it still pains me how oblivious I was. Not only because of how infatuated I became initially, but also because my own lack of self-confidence led me to focus so much on impressing her that I didn't pay attention to certain alarming behaviors early on. I know this experience will stay with me forever. Even anonymously, it feels good to finally share this story. Alex lived in a modest home in a fairly pleasant neighborhood. Working remotely, their office occupied a small upstairs room with a desk positioned by a window overlooking the front of the house. Alex enjoyed opening the window for fresh air and appreciating the view when weather permitted. As autumn was just beginning, they typically kept the window open throughout the workday. One ordinary weekday around noon, while engrossed in work, Alex noticed something through the window. A man stood at the end of their driveway, not walking past or pausing momentarily, but simply standing there, gazing up at the house. Alex couldn't determine if the man could see them, but after a brief moment of eye contact, the stranger walked away. Alex found it peculiar, but continued working, occasionally glancing outside but seeing nothing unusual for the remainder of the day. The following day followed the same routine. During a video call with colleagues, Alex's attention drifted to the window. The man had returned, standing in the identical spot at the driveway's end, staring up at the house just as before. Something about this recurrence felt profoundly unsettling. Alex must have been staring for some time because a co-worker noticed their concerned expression and asked if everything was all right. Alex responded affirmatively and attempted to refocus on the meeting, but kept glancing back. The man remained for about a minute before disappearing. The rest of Alex's workday dragged on, their thoughts consumed by this stranger observing their home. After work, Alex inspected the driveway area, looking for any reason someone might be interested in their house. Everything appeared normal, though Alex realized their office window was clearly visible from where the man had stood, meaning he could likely see Alex watching him. That evening, while watching television with the volume low, Alex heard what sounded like footsteps outside. Startled, they stared at the front door as the footsteps approached, paused briefly, then retreated. Alex hurried to the peephole, glimpsing a figure walking toward the road. Upon opening the door, they discovered a note taped to it. The brief message read, "Alex, answer the door." Alex was horrified. How did this person know their name? What did the message mean? The stranger hadn't even knocked or waited long enough for Alex to answer. This prompted Alex to call the police. 2 officers responded, took a report, but explained there wasn't much they could do except advise Alex to call again if anything else happened. That night, Alex lay awake in bed, unable to sleep, thoughts racing about the man stalking their home and the disturbing note. Just before 2 a.m., a knock echoed through the silent house. Alex froze. After a few seconds, another knock. Their heart raced as they called 911. The dispatcher sent officers immediately, but the knocking persisted at the same steady, unhurried pace throughout the wait. The operator updated Alex that police were 2 minutes away, and shortly after, the knocking paused. 15 seconds, 30 seconds, then a full minute of silence. When officers arrived, no one was at the door. Alex explained what happened, and while the officers seemed to take it more seriously this time, they still couldn't do much beyond promising to patrol the area for the next couple of weeks. Those weeks passed without further incidents. Months later, nothing else had occurred, but the memory still terrified Alex. The cryptic note telling them to answer the door, followed by knocking at 2 a.m., and the lingering fear of the stranger's return. Alex remained uncertain about what the person wanted, who they were, or whether they were truly gone for good. When Jordan was a freshman in high school, they lived in a small, old-fashioned town surrounded by woods. The buildings and houses were spaced far apart, giving everyone room to breathe. Jordan's family home sat deep in the forest, on a decent plot of land that their father had built with his father. Without a proper road or driveway, just a dirt trail. School buses didn't stop there. Jordan either had to walk a mile to a friend's house for pickup or continue the extra distance to school. Usually, they opted to walk the entire way. One seemingly ordinary morning, Jordan was walking down the trail from home, enjoying the peaceful forest sounds, when they spotted an unfamiliar car ahead. It was parked directly on the trail, which only led to and from their house. A stranger's vehicle here was highly unusual. Jordan couldn't recall ever seeing one before. Feeling uneasy about passing the car, Jordan noticed a woman inside, appearing to be in her late 30s or early 40s, with dark circles under her eyes and unkempt black hair. She glanced at Jordan, who looked down to avoid eye contact, but could feel her gaze following as they hurried past. Jordan increased their pace and continued to school. That evening at dinner, Jordan mentioned the encounter to their parents, asking if they knew who the woman was or why she was there. Both parents appeared worried and confused, suggesting she must have gotten lost and telling Jordan not to worry. Despite their reassurances, Jordan could see the concern in their expressions. For the next week, they drove Jordan to school, an unusual arrangement since both started work at 6 a.m., meaning they likely called in late every day just to provide transportation. Jordan thought their parents were overreacting, feeling old enough to handle the situation, but understood they were being protective. The following Monday morning, after a week of rides during which they never encountered the woman or her car, Jordan felt confident enough to resume walking. However, upon reaching the same spot in the woods, the woman was there again, sitting in her car, watching. This could not be coincidence, appearing twice on what was essentially their private driveway in the same location, and only when Jordan was walking alone. Jordan decided to cut through the woods instead of passing her again and took a few steps off the trail. The woman immediately noticed, started her car, and drove closer. Jordan pretended not to notice and walked faster into the trees. The car door opened and footsteps crunched on leaves behind them. Then the woman called out Jordan's full name in an eerily calm, affectionate voice. Jordan turned to look at her. She had a vacant stare and expressionless face, with exhausted eyes and a sickly appearance. Jordan sprinted away and, after losing sight of her, circled back through the woods to home, where they called their parents, who contacted the police and rushed home. To Jordan's surprise, their parents knew exactly who the woman was, their father's ex-wife from nearly 20 years ago. She apparently had long-standing mental health issues and experienced disturbing episodes where she became fixated on things and engaged in troubling behavior. The day Jordan first mentioned seeing her, their parents reported it to police, knowing it had to be her. The authorities failed to take substantive action, merely checking on her and declaring she seemed normal. For that entire week, she had been stalking their house, knowing that whenever Jordan's parents left early for work, Jordan would be walking to school alone. Jordan's parents never revealed what happened to her afterward, or explained what she intended to do or why she was pursuing Jordan, leaving many unanswered questions. In 2019, Morgan worked at a grocery store, typically closing shifts, and lived alone in a small one-bedroom apartment. The store had many regular customers who visited frequently, often around the same times. One such customer was a man who came in just before closing several times weekly. No employees knew his name, but everyone recognized him because nobody appreciated customers arriving minutes before closing time. As the usual cashier at that hour, Morgan typically interacted with him. He always seemed somewhat strange, rarely speaking and perpetually appearing exhausted. One night, he came in as usual just before closing, selected a few items, and approached the register. Morgan scanned everything, he paid, and left without exchanging any words beyond a simple greeting. 10 minutes later, Morgan closed the register, spent a few minutes cleaning up, clocked out, and departed at 10:15 p.m. While walking to their car, Morgan noticed the man still in the parking lot, standing awkwardly beside his vehicle, hands at his sides, staring at the store. Morgan got in their car and drove home. Having the next day off, Morgan stayed up later than usual, not getting into bed until around 1 a.m. Shortly after settling under the covers, a bright light shone through one of the bedroom windows. Assuming it was a neighbor arriving home, Morgan didn't concern themselves with it. The light quickly turned off, seemingly confirming it was just headlights. Morgan fell asleep minutes later. During the night, Morgan awoke to what sounded like a ringing phone. Emerging from sleep in the middle of a dream made it difficult to distinguish reality from imagination. Rubbing their eyes, Morgan checked their phone on the nightstand. The screen was blank with no missed calls or messages. Uncertain what to think and still not fully awake, Morgan was about to return to sleep when something caught their eye. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, not completely latched shut. Morgan always closed their bedroom door, so seeing it open immediately jolted them awake. They got up and pushed it closed to check if it was somehow stuck, but it latched smoothly into the frame as usual. There was no way Morgan had accidentally left it open. Their body began trembling, heart pounding, but they still tried to rationalize the situation. Then Morgan recalled the light scene before falling asleep. Looking through the window blinds, Morgan spotted a car parked in their driveway. They could only see the rear portion, but instantly felt a surge of panic. Who was at their home? Was someone inside with them? Morgan hurried back to the door and switched on the lights, standing there panicking and realizing they should call 911. As they glanced toward the nightstand where their phone lay, just before starting to walk over, Morgan saw an eye peering back at them through a crack in the closet door. Morgan gasped, their body shaking, then spun around and sprinted out of the house. By the time they found a neighbor willing to answer their door and call police, at least 15 minutes had passed. The car remained in the driveway when officers arrived, but the intruder was gone. Using the vehicle information, police quickly tracked him down. It was the man from the grocery store. His explanations were incoherent, but it was evident he had been watching Morgan for some time with malicious intent. Morgan believes the only reason they woke up that night was because the man's phone rang while he was hiding, and he silenced it just as Morgan awakened. Without that fortunate timing, Morgan isn't certain what might have happened or if they would even be alive today. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's horror story and want more creepy tales like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. If you've got your own scary experiences, or if you have any feedback on the quality of my narration and the writing, I'd love to hear about your opinion in the comments below. Stay safe out there, and I'll catch you in the next video.